Welcome. Today we're talking about water leak detection and why it matters. I'm joined by Adam Enns, Senior Account Executive at Integrity Risk Reduction. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Thomas. How you doing?
I'm great. This is an important subject, and for all sorts of different reasons. Before we dive right in, tell me a bit more about yourself, because you've been involved in this space for a while.
Yeah, I've been involved in leak detection systems since about 2021. So, 4 to 5 years now. And I got involved through my uncle, who was the director of building maintenance actually at Baptist Housing. And they had continual leaks in their building. And he finally said there has to be a technology to combat this water damage. So he did his research about over 2 years and explored some systems over in Quebec, actually. And we got involved and became certified dealers for them. We deployed about 4 buildings here throughout the province and multiple residential homes. And from there, I kind of split ways and I got poached by this company, Integrity Risk Reduction. They stem from a parent company, NWI Contracting, and we've had great success so far. We've deployed our system at Verona and King's Landing and Escala, and I think to date we have about $1.378 billion plus of property protected. So
fantastic. So those are all strata communities, and that's who we're here to talk to and about today.
Absolutely.
And obviously there's a lot of things at play. We've seen over the last several years insurance deductibles and premiums rise. They're starting to soften, thankfully, due to the market cycle. But the majority of claims and losses have been related to water. What's causing these leaks?
It stems from so many things, but a lot of it is preventable. And I'll start by saying that it's the dishwashers, it's the fridges, it's the manifolds breaking. And I think there's just such a huge education component behind this, to the fact that people don't know that these systems actually exist. And if they do, they don't know how to deploy them. And so it kind of became a self-serving thing for our contracting side, where a lot of our high wealth clients had major leaks, and they'd actually asked us to explore systems on their behalf. So we started with Honeywell, and then we kind of transitioned over to Yolink that we use now. But they've come from kitchen faucets that have just exploded. That was one of our instances we had where we just installed at a house actually, and the gentleman went to Italy, called us, said, "Hey, I have water at my house. Can you go check it out?" Installed the system a month before, stopped a major leak as a result of the stem in his faucet breaking. So it can stem from its faucets, its dishwashers. Dishwashers and fridges are for sure culprits number 1 and 2 within the suites. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and we have all the data to track and measure that through our Radius server. But it's also old manifolds that are failing as well. There was a building in Vancouver, I won't name it, but they just flooded out 10 floors about a month ago due to a hot manifold cracking and it being a vacant unit. And of course, with it being a vacant unit, water ran for about 8 hours, went from the 10th floor down to P3. This would have been an absolutely preventable water damage incident with our system. So a lot of it, some of it is negligence as well. I'll say that. I had friends that had gone into a friend of theirs suite, and the neighbor above them ran the bathtub, fell asleep. 10 hours later, $10,000 of damage. So
unreal. And the disruption to people's lives can be really substantial, Adam. When you've got a multi-floor leak and incident like that, you could be moving multiple owners out of their homes for weeks or even months, depending on the scale of damage and the scope of repairs.
Absolutely. And I don't think that's something you can even put a price on, interrupting people's daily lives. People have kids, people have sporting events, people have vacations. So we want to make sure that we can keep people within their homes at all times. And so that's part of the reason that we have the systems. It's not just a cost thing. It's not just a premium. It's not just a deductible thing. It's peace of mind and a good living experience.
Absolutely. And if you can deliver a better living experience and reduce the chance of disruption, that has a positive impact on property values. So absolutely. I think that they kind of go hand in hand. You get a better quality of life, and you're maintaining the value of what is, for most people, their most valuable asset.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about the technologies that exist now for loss control and leak detection, because they're not the same thing necessarily, but they go hand in hand. What are the options available, and how is it that Integrity Risk Reduction makes those installations?
Yeah, I mean the systems exist. There's no doubt about that, and they're starting to pop up more and more. You can buy systems off Amazon. You can buy systems off of Home Depot, and I'm not going to lie to you, they work, but they're not certified, and that's the problem. And we've had a couple meetings even with the city of Vancouver, and in order to try and make sure that we're pushing certified NSF 61 systems into the market, and that's it. And so, I mean, you got the Flow by Moens, you have us, and I'm not going to go out and list all the systems. You can go out and do your own research, but we use a Yolink and a Safe House system. So Safe House is our flow sensor. It is the only dual service Chubb approved leak sensor, or sorry, I should say flow sensor that's out there. If you can find another one, please let us know. We've done our research. We get it milled here locally, and then we ship it down to the States where all the technology gets put in. And that's just on the flow sensor aspect.
What does the flow sensor do, Adam, for someone that's not familiar with these technologies?
Yeah,
where does that
absolutely.
go and how does that work?
For sure. So it, as it says, it detects the flow of water. So this is a running tap. This is a leaky toilet, or a running toilet. And so when we install these, we'll set up an arbitrary number in our system of approximately an hour, because your dishwasher, your washing machine, those will load and unload, but nothing should run more than about 45 minutes. And so we'll set up an arbitrary number, whereas if the water is running for more than an hour, it'll shut down your system. And that's to prevent, it's flow, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's preventing against that case where something has gone wrong and you're not there to notice.
Absolutely. And our systems are remarkable. We can catch up to 2 ounces a minute. That's 2 shot glasses. It's quite accurate for sure. So, and
wow, that's fascinating. So even low flow consistently is enough to trigger this type of system.
Literally a trickle. Yeah, if your faucet's trickling, we'll capture it.
Great.
Yeah.
What other components or technologies are out there? Because I have some in my house and they're not flow based, they're sensors.
Yeah, so we have kind of two types of sensors that we typically deploy. One is a rope sensor, and the rope sensor is essentially a sensor with a rope, as it says, and we deploy those under the dishwashers, washing machines, fridges, mechanical rooms, all those harder to reach areas, but they can cover a wide surface area. And how those work is if water hits any point on that rope, it'll send a signal to the controller, which sends the signal to the actuator to close the valve, and then send the notification to your application or to your server via text message, via email, however you have it set up, so you'll know exactly where and when that leak occurred. And then our other component is our water leak sensor 4 with the move alert. That's through Yolink. And this one's pretty unique because a lot of the systems out there have an accelerometer built into their sensors. We use a magnetic switch. And so when you pull the sensor off of the magnetic switch, such as behind your toilet or wherever it may be, we'll know exactly when that sensor's been moved. And we'll also know exactly when it's put back to its home. And that's important because if your toilet or your kitchen sink or whatever is no longer protected by the sensor, we don't know when that leak's going to happen. And it can happen at any time. I got a 1-year-old child who's crawling around, and he loves to pull that sensor off of the magnetic switch because it beeps and it makes noise and it lights up. And if I didn't have, the application or at least the verbal audio noise from it, knowing it's removed, I would have no idea it's off. And I'd have no idea when to put it back. And it was always at that time when the leak occurs. So that's a very unique feature that we have that I haven't seen any other systems have that I think is very, very important, especially with cleaners as well. A lot of units and buildings have cleaners come in, they'll move it to clean, and then they'll forget to put it back, and you won't know that it's away from its home, essentially. So,
that's interesting. So that's a pretty sophisticated use for those that are in a specific location.
Absolutely.
What happens for potential losses that occur within plumbing systems that are in more common areas? What is this? Is that again flow based, or how would you go about detecting those sorts of leaks?
Yeah, for the common areas, like for the public bathrooms and the amenity rooms, we'll deploy the same thing in terms of the sensors with the magnetic switch as well as the rope sensors. Do you want to discuss the plumbing aspect as well?
Yeah, let's talk about that too, because there's a lot of plumbing systems that run through walls and down corridors, and eventually some plumbing systems fail.
Absolutely. So we have the ability to shut down the whole building within 30 seconds, which is very unique. And Thomas, if you got that one photo of our of the riser system there you want to bring up, we can discuss that for a second. Yeah, so this is at the Verona building, and you can choose your level of risk that you want to mitigate in your building. You can just choose sensors, which a lot of buildings in the Vancouver have chosen to do because they have the 24-hour concierge, which is a huge bonus. There's somebody who will constantly be overseeing the server, which is the Radius server that we use, where they'll see exactly what's going on with the system at any point and any time. And so they can call the unit, or they can go up to the unit, hopefully before there's any major damage, without any automatic shut off. And then they can shut it down manually. Verona here, for example, they wanted the ability to shut down all the risers, essentially the whole building, within 30 seconds. And that's something that we were able to accomplish for them. So we got some Promation actuators here, so industrial grade ones, and our valves, and we got some relay switches and boards. And long story short, we can shut down a whole building within 30 seconds if there's any major leaks going on. And we have that ability.
Some words that flew right over my head, and I assume some of our listeners might understand it and some won't. But what are these things circled in green?
Yeah, so circled in green are what's called an actuator and an automatic shut-off valve, or a solenoid ball valve. So all this is doing is it's essentially a motor that provides energy to open and close a valve with the detection of water, in which that relay switch board, circled in pink, will receive the signal, either through a fob or whatever. And usually it's just a fob, where if they want it shut down, we'll just click the fob, open, close, boom. It'll close those valves through the actuator. So they got, obviously, as you can see, they got 1, 2, 3, 4 separate risers that we've installed our system on, with pink being the relay board in which the fob, will pick up the signal to open and close those valves.
Fantastic. That's a very nice visual example of what it looks like after you put the system in. And this is right in the mechanical room. So this will be just in that one spot in every building. That's a great example. Now, what happens next? Like, if you've got this system and it shuts off, how long does it shut off for? And how does it get turned back on? And what impact does this have? Because obviously people consume water. Unless this has happened in the middle of the night, everyone's going to want it turned back on. And how does the system then take those next steps?
Yeah, the beauty of our system is it's fully customizable. So you can set whatever rules and parameters you want within the server that best suits your needs. So some people don't want their water shutting off right away. They want to give it 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and that's totally fine. You can set that up in your system. As for buildings specifically, through the insurance companies, we'll make sure they shut down right away. Insurance companies will want to see that. The customized times is more so for residential homes, in which these systems work equally as well. But if there is a leak, you'll get the notification, the valve will close, you'll hopefully go to your toilet or wherever they told you that the leak was, you'll check it out and say, wow, I'm so glad I had this system. My toilet just exploded and saved me tons of money. Fix the toilet up, and then you can turn the system back on. You can either use a remote fob, you can go into the app and click a little slider there, in which it will open and close it remotely, or it can be done through the Radius server if you have a full building overlook through it, like that way. So there's plenty of ways to turn it on. You turn it on and off at your own pace. For residential homes, they love them for rentals. If you're away and you got a place down in California, you come home and you say, oh, shoot, I forgot to shut my water off. You can shut your water off right through the app, 2 seconds. It's awesome. And you can turn it on right before you get there. So,
I have a home system, an uncertified home system, and it's triggered twice. Once was a slow drip from behind a toilet that was recently installed. And the other one was exterior water that had come in through a little crack in the foundation on a particularly wet day, and I managed to fill that and fix it. And it's really a useful system. So I love it. It gives great peace of mind. And yes, when we're away, easy to hit that button to shut it off, and it happens all automatically from where you are. So I think that they're fantastic. Yeah. There's obviously a lot more complexity when putting something like this into a strata building than into a private residence. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the considerations and the practices for these communities as they're trying to debate the system selection and how to navigate that approval process?
Yeah, one thing they definitely want, and we have an upper hand on some other companies, is they want that local support. We are out of Coquitlam. We can be there shortly if there's any problems. We can oversee the system. They don't typically like to entertain the companies, out of Asia or the companies out of America because there's no local support. And so that's been huge for us, and a question that we get asked all the time. The other thing they'll ask is if we're certified. Yes, fully NSF 61 certified, Health Canada, you name it, Intertech certified. We've done it all. Our system's been vetted, and I think I can speak to Chubb on this as well. I mean, we presented at Chubb probably about 3 months ago, and they had said that our system has achieved the most risk mitigation out of any of the systems they've ever seen, and we became Chubb approved. And the reason I bring Chubb up is because Chubb is all high wealth clients, and I'm sure everybody knows that. So if you can become approved by Chubb, it speaks volumes that you really are a legitimate system. To go back to some of the questions that the stratas are asking, yeah, they all want to know cost, obviously. They all want to know certification. They all want to know insurance. They want to see that local support. And the research, they definitely do. They come at us and they find all the systems. And I think the one thing that we have the upper hand in as well is we're not a Wi-Fi based system. We use what's called LoRaWAN, which is a long range network. And we only need to deploy one hub per floor. That's it. 900 megahertz, quarter mile open air. These hubs that shoot the signals out to the sensors and send them back to the hubs. Super far, super strong. Our partner and I, we walked probably, if I'm being honest with you, I think we'd walked about 4 blocks, and we were still able to pick up the sensor, the door sensor we had as we walked, and send the signal back to the hub. It's super far. And wow. It's fully wireless, so we don't have to break through any walls or anything like that, which also helps. And we have the ability to have our own standalone system through 4G. So we actually have a 4G backhaul in one of our hubs to allow it to use cellular, and a lot of people love that, to make sure it's a standalone, separate system, not tied to any of their Wi-Fi or anything like that.
So you've sent me another picture of an in-unit installation. Maybe you can tell us, and I'll pull that up now, what are we looking at here, and how does this connect to there potentially being another system in the building?
Yeah, so you'll see there that black thing there with the green light on it. That's called the controller. That's what provides power to the actuator, which is the kind of grayish box there with the blue circle on it. And that's what provides the power for that actuator to close and open the valve. And we got a couple options with that with the controller. You can have battery and direct power, or you can have just direct power. Chubb, for example, with the in-pipe leak sensor, the flow sensor, their requirement is to have direct power. So I'll have to run power usually within about 6 feet of that controller in order to power it up to control the actuator. And then the other side of the actuator with that blue circle on it is the valve. We have a couple options with that. We can go stainless steel. We can go brass valve, which is made by Red White, local here in Langley, which is awesome. Nice to have Canadian-made products. And then above it is the yellow handle there. That's your manual open and close, essentially your shut off for your line, in case for whatever reason the valve failed. So that's why it's always good to have more. You got an automatic shut off, you got a manual shut off, and then right below it there, in a 3/4 inch T, below the actuator is the in-pipe leak sensor. You can see kind of the black cord with the copper.
I see that. Yeah, that little copper connector.
So it's got a thermistor in it, and the water will flow and hit the thermistor, and that's kind of what will detect the flow.
Fantastic. And everything below that that's branching off, that's going to the dishwasher, to the fridge, to the toilet, to the sink.
That's the hot and cold domestic lines within the suite. And we've seen up to 4 sets of those in a penthouse suite. Most units, if they're a smaller size, will just have 1 set of hot and 1 set of cold. And we require a valve on each set. So if you got 4 sets, you're going to have 8 valves, you're going to have 8 controllers, you're going to have 8 in-pipe leak sensors. And we want to make sure that we protect every line, not just 1 set, because it's going to be the other 3 that are going to fail on you.
That makes sense. So obviously you've got to have a manual there to turn off so you can install this thing, unless the building water as a whole is turned off. I know you're going to get questions from strata owners when you're installing something into the main parts of your system, not individual units that might be doing something like this. How long does the water have to be off?
Yeah, the plumbers will usually come in. We can usually get one suite done per day. So we do it per suite basis. We will never shut down the water to the whole building. That would just be completely impractical and unfair. But usually it takes about a day if we're doing about 4 sets of manifolds. If we do one, we can usually get it done in about a half a day. So there won't be too big of an interruption to the client. And obviously we schedule that way in advance so people know and they're well aware as to when that's going to happen. So they can plan ahead. They can fill their bathtub. They can fill their sinks. They can go to a friend's house. They can do whatever they need to do to make sure they have water.
Yeah. Easy to work around something that's planned in advance, which is great. When you're doing something with the risers, like the one in the mechanical room, can you do them individually, or how does that work?
Yeah, the riser ones we do individually. You can choose which ones you want to do. If you have a problem riser, for example, one that's continually leaking, I'll transition quickly into Leak Shield. I think it's a great time for this. So Leak Shield is a company of Toronto in which we just became their official distributors, and they use what's called a sodium silicate compound that they'll pump through the risers, or where the water, the main entry point for the water to the building. So the sodium silicate will get pumped through the whole building. It'll create a hard, thin ceramic layer. And long story short, no more pinhole leaks. It's a pretty amazing technology, super safe to drink. One of the buildings they did, the copper level reduced by almost 900%, which is quite phenomenal because you don't want to be drinking copper, you don't want to be drinking lead, you don't want to be drinking iron. And with no more pinhole leaks for the longevity of the system also means no more replumb. There is a huge ROI value behind that. Replums are expensive. So if you don't have to do one and you can just use Leak Shield, which is sodium silicate, great. You'll save a lot of money.
Sodium silicate. Obviously, you don't want to be drinking copper. Do you want to be drinking sodium silicate?
Super safe in your fruits, in your vegetables. Go look at your Sensodyne toothpaste that you use. It's all in there. You actually need silicate to live. And
okay, so that one's not bad. There are other products out there that we've heard of, Adam. Like, what are they putting into the pipes?
Yeah, so the other systems that are out there, which would be direct competition to us, is high tech, and it's a system that also works. There's been great reviews behind it. We try to personally stay away from using polyphosphates. There's a couple of reasons behind that. It actually promotes algae blooms in the environment if it doesn't get properly filtered out on the back end, as well as it descales pipes. So all that crud that's in your pipe will essentially fall into your water system, and you'll now be drinking it on the back end. So whereas Leak Shield encapsulates, high tech will descale. And so you pick your poison, you do your research. I'm not here to tell you what system's best, but I would just advise people to do their research, look up polyphosphates. There's a reason that it says phosphate free on all the laundry detergents, for example. It's not something you particularly want to be exposed to.
Interesting. I didn't know about the major differences between those technologies, but they both ultimately accomplish the same thing, coating your pipes. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
And anything you can do to prevent pinhole leaks in your plumbing system will reduce the likelihood and extend the lifetime of your plumbing system. So that's obviously a big cost savings and a major driver of some ROI.
Yeah, because that was the question we got from a lot of our clients was, that's great that you can protect our dishwashers, our fridges, our sinks, our toilets, but what do we do about the stuff in the walls? And so that's when we finally went out and we did our research and we said, what is there we can do within the walls? And that's how we discovered Leak Shield. I mean, they got over 300 buildings that they've deployed in Toronto, are about to deploy our first one here in BC. And we're looking to help anyone else who has pinhole leak problems because we have the tools and the technology to prevent them from happening and costing you a ton of money and a ton of inconveniences, and protect that stuff now within the walls.
So a couple of double whammies hit over the last several years. You had these rising insurance premiums and deductibles for the strata corporations, and that meant that if there was a water loss that originated from your unit, you would be potentially responsible for the strata's deductible, which may have gone from $10,000 to $250,000, $500,000. There was a building that had $1 million water deductible. And obviously that had an impact on your personal home policy as well, because your personal insurance needs to cover the strata's deductible. And this meant that there were really excessive costs. So systems like this will drop your water deductible and your premiums because you're less of a risk to those insurance brokers and carriers. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, our whole goal is to mitigate risk. And so with that, we deploy in phases. So we have our first phase would be just a deployment of sensors, as I said, which some of the buildings with the 24-hour concierge love because they'll know that something's going on. Our second phase is the sensors with the automatic shutoff valve. It'll shut everything down. You're good to go. That is a BFL flow guard requirement in which we've partnered with as well. I'll come back to that. Our third phase is the sensors, the valves, and the in-pipe leak sensor, which is the flow sensor. And we're never going to lie. We're never going to say we're going to cover 100% of water damage. That would just be a lie on our part.
It's massive mitigation, though. And I mean, that's what we have here at the bottom, right? Without a system, you're reliant on, first of all, somebody detecting and reporting it physically. Then you've got to have someone respond to it, because if this is happening from a plumbing leak in the walls and not from your toilet or your dishwasher, then you're not going to be able to prevent it. You've got to then have somebody physically come in and shut off the water. And then you're dealing with, what is going to be, well, what did you mention there? A 10-story. I mean, I don't even want to think about the cost of that type of water loss. And we've seen lots of them in Vancouver. And those are major dollars and massive disruption. With a system like this, you still could have water escape, but it will obviously be far less in its volume. You'll be able to contain the loss and dramatically reduce the impact and disruption on people's lives, as well as the cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to speak back to the premiums and deductibles, as Thomas said, they are continually rising. Yes, it's softening a little bit, but they are rising. I mean, and with every water damage claim, you're looking at anywhere from usually about 15 to 30% increase in your premiums and deductibles, which is huge. And these $1 million water damage deductibles do exist. I didn't think they could get that high. They do exist. I just met with the building yesterday, and they just got down to 500,000 from 750. Remarkable numbers. Should never get that high. And so that's why we partnered with the buildings we partnered with. They've run into problems with their premiums and deductibles and said, how do we stop this? And so thankfully through BFL FlowGuard, as I mentioned before, we are an approved vendor and an approved system through them, in which they offer a 10% reduction in the premiums and deductibles and rate credits. And then we've also partnered with Chubb, in which Chubb is offering an 8% discount. And so one of the buildings we did was the King's Landing building, and it was a no-brainer for them because they saved 10% on the building insurance policy, which was huge for them. And then they also saved an 8% on the individual policy. So they kind of double dipped in their savings. And so
that's fantastic.
Yeah, and when we do these ROI analysis too for buildings, we're seeing anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 years to pay back the system when you're doing leak shield and you're doing the leak detection system. It's quite remarkable, and that's millions of dollars you can now put elsewhere in your building, whether it be the building envelope or a membrane project or whatever it might be, to reinvest back into your strata or your building. And these are numbers that are accurate. The first thing we tell people is, tell us if our numbers aren't accurate. We'll happily switch them out for you and get you a new calculation. And this is based off the capital cost of the project. This is based off the savings on the premiums and the deductibles. This is based off of the equity saving or the equity enhancement. This is based off of average cost of a leak in which we'll save. And so it spits out a number to us. And we're seeing about 2.5 to 4.5 years to pay back a whole system for a building. It's remarkable. So I'll speak on this slide that's in front of us here. This is the Verona building. And as you can see there, their deductible rose from $50,000 to $500,000 per year. And that's when we got a hold of them based on our contracting side that was doing some work in the building. And they had pretty well called out to us and said, help. And thankfully, we had the technology to do so. So we brought them back down from $500,000 to $250,000 deductible. And eventually, they negotiated down to $250,000. My apologies. And their premium had increased by $90,000. And so the residents were required, as it says on there, to obtain $1,000, an extra $1,000 per year on their personal policies for the new $250,000 deductible. because if it gets high enough, you have to get an individual policy on your insurance, and you got to get all this extra coverage. And so we came in, and we brought them back down to 75,000. Their premium reductions dropped down by 80,000 a year, and the owner's deductible policy no longer required a saving. Was no longer required, so we saved them 173,000, and that kind of came from $1,000 per unit at 173 units. And so major savings to be had with a system like these. It's not, but I always say it's not just the money, as we talked earlier, it's the peace of mind and equity behind it. Because I always say this: if you're looking to buy a building and your building has a leak detection system in it, but the other building does not, I think it's pretty safe to say which building you may be looking to buy a unit in. You want the peace of mind that your building's protected against water damage. And these systems are only as good as, having it. I always say, if you have it in your unit, it's so great for you and the person below you. And that's about it. Because if the person above you doesn't have a system, they're still flooding down into your unit, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's why our recommendation is always to do the whole building and not just individual units. We'll happily do a unit, no problem, if that's what somebody wants. If they have a vacation home or it's a rental or whatever it may be. But we always recommend doing the whole building. So yeah, Verona chose to do the whole building. They were our first case study, and this is essentially what we, had presented to Chubb as well. And they said, wow, that's pretty amazing. And they don't entertain a lot of systems or a lot of meetings even, for that matter.
That's fantastic. That's a great case study. Obviously, this is something that more and more buildings are adopting. You mentioned BFL and their FlowGuard program. Paul Murcutt will join us in a couple of weeks to talk about other strategies to mitigate losses and get better terms on your insurance policies, which is fantastic. And obviously, this is a big part of it. So good for you guys for being a leader in that space and for helping everyone with their personal lines coverage as well. I think that's a huge win. Adam, I'm going to switch to a few questions that we've got. So one, you've touched on, it's how long water needs to be off. It sounds like that can be as little as a few hours within a day if you're looking at an individual unit. And how long would it take start to finish to do a whole building if it was 50 units?
Yeah, great question. If whole building for 50 units, man, it's hard to really come up with a number for that, because it all depends on the number of water sources, the number of manifolds, all that kind of stuff. But if I had to arbitrarily say one, I mean, we did one townhouse unit in which we did sensors with the valve, with the in-pipe leak sensor. We did that in about 4 hours.
Amazing. So
we 50 units.
Depending on complexity, you could be looking at days to a couple of weeks to do the whole building if they were being done individually.
50 units, we'd be looking at probably one unit a day, I think, is very realistic. And so let's just say 2 months with, you're going to run into problems. You're going to run into homeowners that aren't home, even though they said they would be home. So you can't access them. Stuff like that's going to happen. So I think realistically, yeah, I would spit out a number of 2 months, 60 days for 50 units, I think would be very accurate.
Okay. And in terms of costs, what is the average cost per unit?
Yeah, so as I mentioned,
the number.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so the number rises with the more water sources, means more sensors, which means added time, added deployment, added plumbing time, added electrical time. To give the number, though, you're probably looking at anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 per unit, and that's based on the number of manifolds. That's based off the number of sensors, based off a number of factors. But I want to clarify too. That's not just the cost of the system. If for the sensors alone, if you want to do sensors alone, easily under $1,000, no problem. We'll come in there and get that done. The reason the cost adds up is because obviously plumbers, you got electricians, you got a deployment team, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to, it just depends on the size of the unit. It really depends.
My home was less than 1,000. Again, it was the plumber installing the shutoff and then me putting the sensors around. So it makes sense to me that when you've got something fairly simple, the cost can be lower. When you've got a very complex building with lots of fixtures, high-end buildings, you guys deal a lot with. Obviously, because it's not inexpensive, it's something that buildings that tend to be more valuable or have, I guess, more fixtures would tend to do. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, and with saying that, we can do it. It can come down to as small as $1,500 a unit. I mean, we've done that before. And just for the smaller one bath unit with your typical, dishwasher and your fridge and what else you got, your washing machine. If it's just, and one bath. I mean, it's not hard to do it for a totally reasonable cost.
So Adam, I mentioned I was sold on this before we ever spoke. I put it into my house. I think it's valuable. I know that a lot of strata owners and strata councils will know that it's valuable. But what is the biggest barrier you face when implementing these systems in a strata?
Yeah, the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, is education. People simply still don't know that systems like these exist. So any meeting I get with a strata member or a strata manager or a developer or a realtor is always a great meeting because it's just educational based. I just want to let people know that these systems exist, how they work, and you can go out and do whatever you want with that information. The other barrier that we're running into is all the projects that the buildings currently have going on. They just don't feel that they have time to entertain another system or another project with another cost. And so with that, I'll say we have actually secured funding to subsidize the whole cost of the system for the building, which is very unique because not a lot of systems can offer that. And so it does come at an interest rate, and we can discuss that privately if anyone wants to have a further discussion at a later time. But a lot of buildings, I should say, are saying, I want the system and I want it now. We just can't afford it. And this is how we combat that problem.
Someone mentioned that they heard feedback on the mic occasionally. You're working in the shop, Adam. So I think they were hearing.
We got a millwork shop down here, and those guys don't want to stop for me. So
I can understand that. We've had a question I'm going to pull up on the screen. So Andrew Brown asked about lease terms and advising tenants of leak detection systems that may result in temporary shutoffs with no notice. It's true. You could have those interruptions, couldn't you?
We could have those interruptions. Absolutely. But as I said, we always try to give
there
notice.
Would be lease terms that you'd want to have put into those tenancy contracts if that sort of system was installed.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, that makes sense. Good comment. Good question. Adam, I'm all out of questions. I've really enjoyed learning a bit more about how this can be applied within a bigger community, especially the flow sensors and how sensitive those can be to slow leaks, and the leak protection system that you're now able to roll out in collaboration with your partner from Toronto. I think that's very exciting. Everyone should consider a leak shield system to prevent pinhole leaks in their copper piping systems. Next week, I'm going to be joined by former strata manager and writer, Jacqueline Jeffrey. We're going to talk about vendors and building relationships with strata managers. So that should be a good conversation. Adam, I hope we'll have you back. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time, Tom.